Let's Talk Development, Season 3, Episode 1.
Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Development, which is a podcast series by CDPR. My name is Usman Khan. I'm a faculty of economics at LUMS, and I also head the investment and trade work of the Revenue Mobilization Investment and Trade Program funded by the British High Commission. I'm joined today with Hamid Yaqoob Sheikh Saab, who is the team leader for the Revenue Mobilization Investment and Trade Program and has been ex-Federal Secretary Finance, Federal Secretary for Planning, and also Provincial Finance and Planning Chairman previously. So we are going to talk about the issue that Pakistan has been grappling for the last several years, which is about trade balance, the impact on balance of payments, and how it sort of figures into the overall economic stability of Pakistan. So welcome, sir, and we'll start our conversation. So my first question, obviously, as a practitioner, you see that, and especially because you have been part of IMF negotiations as well, overall economic stability, trade plays a substantial role, and our balance of payment crisis has been a critical part of it. And, there is a lot of evidence which says that as soon as the economy hits a bit of growth, we move back into a BOP crisis. So obviously, it's not just the volatility within Pakistan, but also the volatility globally that impacts our trade balance. So how do you think that, given our structure of trade, the global commodity prices and the exchange rates actually impact Pakistan's volatility in the trade balance?
Thank you, Usman. Thank you for having me. As you said, we Pakistan as a country has been going through these crisis after crisis, and the effort has been to kind of reach a balance where we can somehow manage or balance the current account so far, and the emphasis has been to get as many dollars as possible, which has not been possible through trade, but through other measures, through remittances and through loans and other sources. We've been as a country which is part of the global value chain. The effort has been to make sure that we export higher and higher services and products. But traditionally, as a textile exporter, as an exporter of goods which are generally of low value, our exports have not been able to attract a lot of value. So the dollars inflow has been rather dismal. It's increasing, but not at the pace at which our comparator countries have managed to do. So we're in a trap where we have higher demand for imports, which means that dollar outflow is higher, and relatively slower pickup in the export, which means that the dollar inflow is lower. So every time we face this situation, we get into the issue of trade balance, which leads to the other imbalances. So any change in depreciation of rupee obviously raises our costs of imports, and although there is a whole theory about depreciation also supporting exports, but that's not really supported by data. We see that only a fraction of improvement is witnessed in imports. The decrease in the depreciation in rupee generally does not lead to substantial increase in exports, but it does lead to increase in cost of production of exportable goods as well. So every time we see a depreciation, we suffer, and also every time international commodity prices go up, since our dependence on international commodities for both for fuel and cooking oil is huge, so we end up with a huge imbalance, which reflects in all the trade imbalance and then the current account imbalance.
Thank you. And I think you've raised really the key point here, that I think our structure of export basket is such that a lot of it is still dependent upon the import. And in fact, the work that we've done with CDPR and Remit actually shows that, when export prices drop by about 15% when rupee is depreciated, but the reverse, the elasticity is zero if the currency appreciates. So that actually shows the inelasticity side of both sides. And again, as you mentioned, that because majorly our imports are on related to petroleum products and raw food that is coming in for processing, any form of exchange rate changes and global market price changes actually impacts that element, and that's the reason why we have failed to actually experience that gain due to depreciation. So moving on, Ahmed Sab, I would like to also ask you to discuss some of the key factors that is influencing Pakistan's trade competitiveness. So, broadly, the first part was on the prices, but what are some of the other things, and how can we, or how we have effectively or not so effectively used our trade agreements and regional partnerships to address our export performance?
So, firstly, I think we partly discussed the value chain argument. We're sitting as a country, we sit relatively very low on the global value chain. So our produce is of low, inferior quality. It does not attract the kind of price which the premium products of the same product, for example, the shirts made of refined cotton that Bangladesh, for example, is producing, or Sri Lanka is producing. We export raw cotton to these countries who refine them and export them at many multiples of the price we sell cotton for. So the first, I think, before we even go towards the trade agreements, I think the first issue that we need to grapple with is the issue of our own capacity, of own capability, and where we are in the value chains. Unless there's a push towards finer goods, towards moving up the value chain, whatever agreements we have, if not able to use those agreements, for example, the GSP Plus and other agreements, if we continue to export bed linen and towels, that you're not going to gain much out of that. So we've done the trade agreements. That's one part. But as I said, our own capacity is the more important part. On the trade agreement, as you asked, I think it's easier for an outsider to criticize and say that they've not, government has not done very well. But frankly, it does, as an outsider, it does appear that we've not done a great job. And even if we've negotiated some, we've not, really, we've really built on the comparative advantage. So the result is that the biggest trade is with China, and you see we are, net importers. The balance is in China's favor. So I think there's a lot that we need to learn from the previous trade agreements. It seems that the trade agreements have been dictated more by the diplomatic side of the relationship rather than the trade side of the relationship. Countries in modern time, these times, they mix this together, and I think the most recent and classic example would be the United States, where they've clearly, President Trump has linked up both diplomacy and trade and economics together, and look at as from the US's point of view rather than different verticals of governance.
Thank you. I think on the first point, I would also like to sort of add and get your comments on when we talk about competitiveness. I think one of the reasons for that is also I would say like a missed opportunity, not a failed outcome, that we've not actually been able to produce companies to scale. Even if you look at very recent trade data, the average export size is about $105,000 per firm. That is sort of decimals when we talk about global size of the trade. So because the firms are small, we actually lag on productivity, we lag on competitiveness, and because the firms have not been able to grow. And based on some of the work that I've done under our Remit program and previously as well, and where I would like your comment is, it's also to do with our overall economic governance of institutions, of economic ministries. We talk about, historically, unfortunately, whenever we've spoken about governance, we've spoken about governance from more of a management of government ministries, but we've not talked about economic governance. For example, Ministry of Commerce operates very independently of Ministries of Industries and Production. Both of these ministries operate very independently of Board of Investment, and then there's the Prime Minister Office. So all of these economic ministries, and then there's FPR, right? So all of these are part of the same chain, but somehow our central economic governance policy has not been able to link. So a lot of the time when the government takes initiatives, there is a cancellation effect because Ministry of Commerce is only focused on export, but where will export come from, right? You'll have to manufacture. If the manufacturing policy is not talking to export policy, there is a lag. Similarly, where will manufacturing come from? It will come from investment. So if that is not linked in, then the whole chain does not work. So how do you think we could take, based on your experience, how can we really work on the governance of economic institutions in Pakistan?
Usman, I think you've hit the nail, so to say. This fragmentation of economic decision making is something which has been, the need has been felt by many people, by the prime ministers and by international partners and the civil servants as well. But the structure has been, I'd be very frank, it's actually broken. So the only mechanism that we have, unfortunately, is not fully exploited. And that's the Economic Coordination Council, which comprises of all the ministers and secretaries and specialists of economic ministries. But the role of ECC has been limited to a certain decisions, not on the long-term economic decision. And I think there's a failure both on the part of the political masters or elite and also of the machinery or the civil service, because the other major player, or so to say responsible actor, is the Planning Commission, who is responsible for coordinating and discussing all of these policies. We don't see that happening in the Planning Commission as well. And the result is that ministries work independently, and it only comes together at the level of the Prime Minister, which, it becomes very difficult to bring in different perspectives together at that level. And then it obviously leads to delays and going back in circles. So I think, as I said, need is there. I think the mechanisms are there. It's just making them operational. There's need for more consultative discussions, making these forums more effective, ECC more effective. I remember, and I'll not name names, I remember in one of the ECC meetings, a senior minister said that this is not a debating forum. And which was, shocking for most of us, that where else would you debate? So, so the forums are there. I think there is a need to make them more effective. And I think what has happened is that while the need and the efficacy and the bypass that we set up through SAFC, it's a need of the hour. But that's not the forum. The formal forum were the ECC and the Planning Commission. If all the players were to make that effective again, and also bring in provinces at those levels, because all the action really is in the provinces. So there's a need to bring not just the economic ministries, FBR, finance, provinces all together, so that there's more debate, and then products or policies are developed and go through these channels. The other, I think, one area in which there's a role for academic word. What we see is that while the articles and columns and papers, they talk about, criticize the policies or the drafts that they see, I don't see that debate happening in those academic circles as well. How many universities and how many papers have the academia come up with on exports, for example, on FTAs, for example, on any policy? I haven't seen many. So I think there is this gap which is there. And as in my current role as team leader remit, and where you also are with me, this is one area in which we're trying to help the government with into bringing in more and more debate on different aspects, so that whatever draft or whatever the policies are suggested, they are more consultative.
Thank you, Amit Sahab. I think, and on the other point that you made earlier, part of the question which was on regional agreements and preferential trade agreements and free trade agreements, I think the governance issue also sort of impacts that. So when you say that all of us need to sort of work in a harmonized manner, so implementation and design of those agreements would really sort of work on how strong that economic governance operates. So I think that's a key lesson from that. My next question, slightly diversifying away from the existing one. So as the data suggests, and we keep hearing this debate, it's a tricky one as well. We in our exports, I think we can say that we are sort of a hostage to our own success, which is sort of the textile sector, right? So we had the entire value chain starting from agriculture, where we grow cotton, to the garments industry, and the entire value chain is here. But a lot of critiques on the sector do say that having the entire value chain has been to our disadvantage when they compare us to Bangladesh or Vietnam or perhaps Sri Lanka as well, where a lot of, because they had an open stance of inputs, they were able to quickly diversify even within textile sector and garment sector into more value added. However, we have been hostage to that, where it has pushed us to a low risk equilibrium where 60% of our exports is dependent upon the textile sector. So any changes that we try to do also then risk several years maybe of a drop down
or a cotton crop, for example. This year's cotton crop is
So how do you think in this particular situation Pakistan can look to diversify, not necessarily leave textile, but improve the portfolio that we have?
I think the first sort of example that come while you were asking this question, the first example that came up, that I thought of was of Interloop, for example. Within this very sector, they have specialized and moved up the value chain, and they're one of the top suppliers of premium brands. So the opportunity is still there. It's just that are we investing on innovation? Are we willing to take that risk? Are we willing to go that extra mile or not? If Interloop can do it, I'm sure there are others who can also do it. And there are others. I'm just taking Interloop's name, but Adidas is, supplying, firms are supplying to Adidas and other sports manufacturers. The other day, my son called me very excitedly from Toronto. He's based there, that he bought a Levi's jeans, and it turns out that it's made in Pakistan jeans. And he was so excited that he was able to get a Levi's jeans which is made in Pakistan. So, so there are examples, there are products which we are supplying. It's just that they're not enough in number and in quantity. So I think we have to come out of that comfort zone, and the government has also to give a clear sort of indication of what it is betting on. It's not betting on subsidies anymore. It's betting on innovation, and that's where the incentives would lie. And that's the direction. We have to, for once, I think we have to decide if it's agriculture or industry or whatever, and then move in that direction. And, the entire economic decision making, the state bank and the credit lines and everything, tax, etc., has to fall in line in that. And that's where, in a way, we kind of, the broad architecture is what we're trying to develop under this sport on industrial policy, which will kind of lay the foundation for this direction for the future.
So basically the work that is ongoing on industrial policy, I think the critical question that we're trying to answer there is to really see how we can finally look at optimizing the economic structure for Pakistan. I think, as you rightly mentioned, that yes, while we lack on innovation, but there are then clear reasons why we do that, because where have been the returns?
Incentives,
The incentives and the returns are not there where people would make investments into innovating for products that would have global markets, because there's a lot of other things, when we talk about investments in property.
If you provide, exactly.
And
if you
other
provide
assets.
incentive and infrastructure in real estate, people will invest there.
People will invest. But so in terms of this, and as I said when we started our conversation, that when I look at development Pakistan, I see it as a series of missed opportunities rather than failed outcomes. We have another emerging opportunity that is coming up, which is related to climate and green products and exports and that. Now that clearly is a new area. There is clearly where there is a lot of policy space to intervene for the government, because obviously it's in national interest and also in global interest. And I think in terms of answering the question on diversification, I think there is a lot of innovation that is already possible, because if you look at some of the recent work that we've done on green and circular economy, we see that a lot of circularity actually happens in developing economies per se, rather than being called a circular action. The best example that I give is that in our households, the youngest sibling actually wears clothes for generations, right? So so that's an example of circularity. Because incomes level are low, so it's also need-based circularity. So maybe there are more local solutions that we can actually innovate on, but obviously it would need some supporting policies. The work that we've done with CDPR obviously does talk about the role of non-tariff barriers, the role of tariff structures. Although I think now Ministry is moving towards a more cascading, consistent tariff base and eliminating a lot of ambiguities. But I would like you to comment on our inability, and again, that's my own research perception, so I may be entirely incorrect, but I think as a country, we've not been able to use some of these other measures, which are non-tariff barriers, because they also, in a way, improve your own quality, because they have to be enforced fairly. So how do you see the opportunity in climate and this more linked towards moving away from tariff manipulations to more on other measures to really offer Pakistan a competitive ground?
I think, as you very rightly said, that the whole climate and green discussion and all the green thinking and policy and the frameworks, they provide one more opportunity for countries like Pakistan, and especially Pakistan. We've so far seen that from the victim angle, that we're not the highest polluters, but we're one of the biggest victims. But the opportunity is on the other side, which is benefiting from whatever benefit we can take. And I'll again go back to the work that CDPR and REMIT have done on circularity, on green technology, for example, on the banana fiber work. I think there's always innovation which would show us where the opportunities lie. They do not lie in the normal, usual sectors and usual practices. So, in my view, the government would always lack in this sector. It will have to learn from perhaps the private sector or the academic world or the research houses. So it's really the opportunities, and because of the bottom line, I think private sector can guide even the government on the frameworks. For as we discussed in our debates, in discussions, that on the banana fiber, it's really the whole regulatory framework which is absent, which is required. So that's where private sector can help even the government in developing infrastructure for regulations or regulatory processes, which will help Pakistan to enable not just in accessing financial markets, but also accessing markets where they can produce and export to. I think there is a lot of potential. There's a lot of opportunity, and people are willing to pay more for this. And I also recall a recent decision of the Punjab government, which I don't see being implemented very easily, but I think that's a step in the right direction. that's kind of preparing people for the changing in behaviors. You may have read that they've banned washing cars in homes. Now it's very difficult, but I think it's a signal that is coming out from the government, and this is led by this is led by really the High Court, because court started questioning it. So it's really, I think, not the government. In this case, it will be other actors who will show the government the way.
Thank you, sir. And I think you're right in a way that climate, as well as historically as well, do offer us opportunities of innovation and really diversifying our exports. And I think if we go by traditional trade theory, so we have a bit of a comparative advantage in agriculture. And I think agriculture is one sector and food, where climate is going to have the maximum impact as well. I think it's just about making that fine balance between the two to really capture that opportunity and market and grow further. But I think a lot would depend upon, again, based on your previous roles, not the current one, a consistent policy environment by the government. We do hear about consistent policy environments a lot in terms of talks and everything, but what is really a consistent policy environment? I think that's a tough question, and one really needs to sort of break it down in terms of setting some broader objectives, and then really the government working towards that. And I think, again, the fundamentals are still there, as you discussed earlier, where we talk about lack of productivity, the scale, and also, I think, importantly, the informality within the sector. We've in our discussion missed the entire element, and that's I think how my bad of framing the questions. But there are a lot of women exporters that are in line, but because of their small scale, they're unable to really tap into the market. So they're doing some very good products which do have international markets, but really the inability within the economy to connect them. And again, another policy consistency questions comes in there, because the overall issue, because of the contract enforcement and all of that elements, which has actually reduced the citizen state trust, unfortunately, in Pakistan, really sort of makes people remain informal and small, because as they expand, the risks increase. So I think it's a complex puzzle, but nevertheless, I think we did touch upon some of the major areas, and thank you so much, sir, for your time. I think it was a good discussion, and we'd like to conclude it. So
thank you very much, Usman.